Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, all you viewers out there on Facebook Live. My name is Stephen DeFonso. I am a parishioner and volunteer here at Blessed Trinity Parish. I'm pleased to be sitting here with Matt Fradd, Catholic speaker and apologist, and he's going to spend a few moments with us now to answer some of our questions. So, welcome, Matt.
G'day, Stephen.
Welcome to Canada, eh?
Yeah.
And
Stop it.
Thanks for being here. So jumping right in, being the Catholic celebrity that you are, I'm sure many people are familiar with the good work that you do, especially surrounding such topics as sexuality, marriage, and specifically pornography. So what drives you to be so passionate in the fight for love and chastity?
I don't think I'm a Catholic celebrity, let me just say that. I talk to young people about porn for a living, if that means I'm famous. What do famous people do? But no, what drives me? Well, I worked with a group called Catholic Answers in San Diego doing apologetics. You might be familiar with them. And as I would get up and just proclaim the basic gospel message to teenagers, young adults, men's conferences, I was keenly aware that a good portion of those I was speaking to were immersed in hardcore internet pornography. And I'm of the opinion that if we're immersed in this type of sin, that I'm going to use an analogy, it's almost as if our heart has been scorched or is going to be unreceptive to the seeds of the gospel. And so trying to proclaim the gospel to someone who is in a state of serious sin, that's spiritually speaking, but then also psychologically thinking about what pornography, how it affects us, how it changes the way we think about ourselves, the goodness of our bodies, the intrinsic dignity of others. You know, it's just an obstacle. And so I'm really passionate for the sake of evangelization. So that's it. I want people to know and love Jesus Christ.
Beautiful.
And this is one of the big obstacles today, to knowing and loving him.
Beautiful. Well, you're obviously very devoted to your mission, which is very inspiring to see, especially in today's world. Now, I know that most of your work is focused mainly on pornography, which is desperately needed in the church and today's society in general. And I think that science is kind of starting to catch up to what the church has been saying for years and years, that pornography is bad and it's detrimental to the health and the well-being of its users. But I don't think it's enough, is it, to simply know the science and the morality that states that pornography is bad. For those of us who continually struggle with it and try to overcome it but can't, we need a good game plan, good steps to take to overcome our struggles. So I'm going to ask you, what are your top 3 tips to overcoming pornography addiction?
I can tell you. If someone is watching this and they are struggling with pornography and they want to overcome it, the obvious thing that you have to be doing is having accountability software and filtering, an accountability partner. If you don't do these things, then I would question whether or not you're even interested in sobriety, and even whether you should receive pardon in the sacrament of confession, because I'm not sure you're that contrite. These are like the obvious things you have to do: accountability, filtering, and accountability software. But if one is in this state, here are the 3 things I'd say. Therapy, group, like a 12-step group, and spiritual direction. In our experience at Integrity Restored, which is who I work for, these are like the 3 legs on a stool, okay? So group, right? Being before people, working the steps. So people can go to sa.org, find a group in their area. They can even kind of go on through phone. That's important. It's important that other people know us, that we allow light to be shine on this topic, and that we journey with others, that we're in a supportive community. And then the 12 steps in themselves are just good. Therapy is, not everyone needs it, but all of us can benefit from it, including me. So therapy is crucial. At Integrity Restored, we have a Getting Help section, and there's a Find a Therapist. People can punch in their postal code and find a therapist in their area, someone who's trained in sex addiction. So often people will say to me, well, is it important that the person's Catholic? And I would say, ideally, yes, but it is better to find a therapist trained in sex addiction therapy who's not Catholic than to find a Catholic therapist who isn't trained in sex addiction therapy. And perhaps before going to a therapist, you might say to them, as a Catholic, my faith's very important to me. I'm not okay with masturbation or pornography in moderation or even contraception. And most therapists, no doubt, would be very open to respecting that. And then thirdly, spiritual direction. So those, speaking very broadly, we can get a lot more specific if you want, but I think if someone's tried again and again and again and again and again, I'd want to say to them, are you trying these three things? Have you done them or not? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, I think those are definitely some good tips for our viewers.
People like quick tips, right? Yes, this is the problem. We want a silver bullet. People listening to me want me to tell them to buy the blue scapula. Like, what's the thing I need to buy? Like, what's the prayer or the book I need to read? And this comes out of this faulty understanding that freedom from porn is a destination instead of a daily choice that we make by our actions. And it isn't. Freedom isn't something that you wake up with in 9 days and go, oh gosh, that's what it feels like. Freedom is day by day by the choices I make. So it's a journey, not a quick fix.
Absolutely. I think, and I'm sure you've had people tell you that even with a good game plan and good steps and techniques to overcome attachment to sexual sin, it's easy to continue to fall into them, and then to fall into despair, to fall into hopelessness, to feel that this obstacle is too big, too difficult for me to overcome, and that I'll always be attached to it or addicted to it for my entire life.
Yeah.
So what words of encouragement and hope can you offer to both men and women who are struggling with sexual sin?
I'd like to say that this isn't an all or nothing battle. You're going to have setbacks. You're almost certainly going to have relapses. Get up, look to Christ, trust in Him, and continue walking. If we think of this as an all or nothing battle, like once I have that prayerful experience, once I read that book, I'm finally free, and again, that we're treating it like it's a destination. But rather not to be that disappointed by our setbacks. If we have a setback, don't look to yourself, because if you do that, you might despair. Don't look to people who are worse than you, because then you might feel this pride unnecessarily. But look to Jesus. Jesus isn't scandalized by our sin. He's not angry with us. It might be a good prayerful experience to reflect upon the first time one was exposed to internet pornography. And sometimes we might say to this person, what do you think Jesus would have done if he had walked into the room while you were looking at pornography or masturbating? And often people will say, oh gosh, I don't even want to think, he'd be angry. And you say, no, he wouldn't. He would have held you and he would have pulled your head into his chest. And he would have said, I'm sorry this happened to you. This shouldn't have happened to you. Yeah. So, not to beat ourselves up. Jesus isn't scandalized by us. It's important that we recognize why we're going to this sin in the first place. And I think to sum it up, we could say that we turn to pornography and masturbation because it soothes us. That we find within ourselves this sort of internal friction, which is caused by all sorts of things. Feeling invisible, feeling unwanted, feeling rejected, lots of stuff, emasculated. And then what we do is we turn to a behavior to regulate our affect, our emotional state. This is why we binge on Netflix. This is why I like to eat peanut butter M&Ms by the handful when my kids drive me crazy at 5 p.m. It's, we have these certain behaviors that we turn to regulate our emotions. Well, that's really why a lot of us are turning to porn, though we may never have thought of it like that. So to recognize what is it that's kind of leading me to act out in this way. And that's where therapy can come in to help us kind of get to that root. So, trusting in the Lord's mercy.
Okay, thank you. Now, on the other hand, of this conversation about people who struggle with sexual sin, are a group that maybe are often forgotten in this conversation. And these are people who are affected rather directly or indirectly by a loved one's indulgence in pornography or sexual sin. Spouses, parents, children. And when they discover that a loved one is indulging in sexual sin, it can be a very difficult and heavy burden for them to carry. So what words of encouragement and hope can you offer to those of us who have loved ones who are struggling with sexual sin?
Right, so here's my experience, which is fallible and limited, granted. If in a marital relationship, for example, one partner is struggling with pornography, it's almost always the man. If the woman is addicted to pornography, or not just addicted, but wants to view it, she more than the husband, wants to bring it into the marital bed so this can be a communal experience. But in my experience, if one of them is struggling, it's usually not just the wife, all right? If it's going to be one or the other, it's usually the man. So after talks that I give and seminars, I'll often have a distraught wife approach me and she'll ask me this question. What can I do about my husband? Which is a legitimate question, but it seems to me that a prior one ought to be asked, namely, what can I do about me? Because those who are living with someone who is acting out in this negative way are victims of what what therapists are calling betrayal trauma. And there was a study that was done that looked at these women who were with spouses, and they were exhibiting signs identical to PTSD. So it's something that they need to address. Now, how might they do it? Here's 3 suggestions. One is, my wife and I edited a book called Restored: True Stories of Love and Trust After Porn. And in that book, among other things, here's 10 individual stories from wives who are talking about the hell they went through, right? So there's that book. Another book is a book by Real Ann Croshaw called What Can I Do About Me? Great book. Thirdly, Bloom for Women. Bloom like a flower blooming. Bloom for Women is a beautiful site, a beautiful community of women who are dealing with betrayal trauma and can find help online. So that might have answered the first part of your question. I forget if there was more to it, but that's what I'd say to women as a beginning. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Matt, I want to thank you again for taking the time to be with us here this evening. And I want to thank you moreover for the important, invaluable, and I'm sure difficult work that you do for the church and for society in general. It means so much to people who are struggling. It means so much to people who are affected by a loved one's struggle, and the work that you do is priceless. So I want to thank you again for being with us and for the work that you do.
Thank you very much.